What happens when a man known for his grace, charm, and unshakable composure finally reaches his breaking point, live on national television? Before we dive into this moment that left the entire studio gasping, make sure you subscribe to Stage View and hit like, comment right now, because what you're about to hear is one of the most intense celebrity confrontations ever to unfold in front of a daytime audience. It began like any other episode of The View: bright lights, buzzing cameras, the murmuring excitement of the studio crowd warming up before the hosts walked out. But there was something different in the air that morning, something unspoken, a tension that seemed to swirl beneath the surface like an approaching storm. Hugh Jackman, the Hollywood icon whose name alone draws standing ovations, was scheduled to appear for what was supposed to be a light-hearted interview. He had just wrapped a grueling stretch of publicity for his latest project, but even through exhaustion, he maintained the same signature warmth that made audiences adore him. Still, his team had quietly noticed his fatigue, those tiny, fleeting cracks in the wide smile he used to conceal how drained he really was. Backstage, as assistants buzzed around him, offering last-minute touch-ups and checking the time, Hugh sat quietly, rotating a simple silver ring on his finger. That gesture, subtle and repetitive, had long been a sign that something was weighing on him. But no one expected what would come next. A stage manager poked her head in. "We're ready for you, Mr. Jackman. 1 minute." He nodded, exhaled, and rose to his feet. Even when tired, Hugh carried himself like a calm ocean, steady, open, endlessly patient. But today there was a strange stillness in his eyes. The kind that came from nights of restless sleep and too many headlines, too many questions he didn't want to answer. Especially one topic he desperately hoped, wouldn't come up. As the band played and the hosts made their entrance, Behar was already in a mischievous mood. Producers loved it when she stirred the pot. Audiences loved it even more. It was her signature. But sometimes, her instincts for humor and provocation pushed her a little too far. The cameras rolled. The applause swelled. The host settled in. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hugh Jackman." He stepped onto the stage, smiling politely as the crowd erupted. They adored him. Wolverine himself, the Broadway showman, the gentleman of Hollywood. He shook hands with Whoopi, Sunny, Sarah, and then Joy. She gave him a grin that hinted she was already plotting something. Hugh sat down, adjusting his jacket, posture composed. He appeared relaxed, but those closest to him, those watching carefully, might have noticed how his shoulders remained just a bit too rigid. Whoopi kicked things off smoothly, asking about the new film, his return to a physically demanding role, and how he balanced the toll it took on him. Hugh answered gracefully, even throwing in a few self-deprecating jokes that made the audience laugh. But then Joy leaned forward, eyes glinting with that familiar mix of curiosity and provocation. "So, Hugh," she began casually, "I think everyone's wondering, how's your personal life holding up with all these rumors swirling around?" There it was, that one landmine he prayed she wouldn't step on. A faint hush swept through the studio. Not silence yet, but an instinctive tightening. The type of quiet that happens when people sense something delicate, something that might crack if touched too roughly. Hugh's smile dimmed just slightly. The kind of subtle shift that only those paying close attention would catch. "Well," he said, choosing his words gently, "I try not to pay attention to rumors. My focus is on my work, my family, and—" Joy cut in before he could finish, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, Hugh, you know how it is. People talk. They've been speculating about your marriage, your relationships, well, and you always avoid it. Why not just clear it up right here?" A ripple moved through the audience, half gasps, half eager murmurs. Sunny raised her eyebrows, Sarah shot Joy a warning glance, and even Whoopi leaned in slightly as if bracing herself. Hugh inhaled slowly. He tried to answer calmly. "I'm not here to talk about private matters." "But that's exactly why people want you here," Joy pressed. "You're this big star with this perfect public image. Don't you think viewers deserve honesty?" The word deserve struck a nerve. His ring stopped turning. Hugh's jaw tightened, ever so slightly. This wasn't the first time he'd been prodded about deeply personal topics that tabloids twisted, dissected, and sold for clicks. But it was the first time someone had pushed him this hard on live television, cornering him with a smile that masked the blow behind it. "Joy," he began, his voice still gentle but carrying an unmistakable warning. "There are boundaries. And I believe everyone deserves a bit of respect when it comes to their personal life." Joy chuckled, leaning back as if amused by his discomfort. "Oh, boundaries. Come on, Hugh. You're a public figure. Surely you know those come with the territory." The audience murmured again, some shifting in their seats, others leaning forward, sensing that the atmosphere had shifted, that something volatile was beginning to smolder beneath the surface. Hugh's eyes narrowed, not angry but deeply disappointed, like someone who realized they had been pushed into a corner they never asked to be put in. "Being a public figure," he said carefully, "doesn't mean surrendering your humanity. That line struck the room like a soft thunderclap. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. But Joy wasn't done. Not yet. She leaned forward again, elbows on the table, voice pitched louder for drama. But Hugh, people say that your silence is the reason the rumors keep growing. Don't you think clearing the air would help? I mean, what are you hiding? The word hiding snapped through the air like a struck match. A couple of people in the front row audibly gasped. Sarah visibly winced. Whoopi sighed, her expression turning stern. And Hugh finally broke. Not in a shouting, explosive way. No, it was quiet at first, too quiet. The type of quiet that comes from a man who has swallowed too much for too long. He placed both hands on the table. Slowly, deliberately. Joy, he said, his voice steady but laced with steel. I've come on this show many times. I've always shown respect. I've shared my work, my heart, my vulnerabilities. But what I will not do is allow anyone, on this show or anywhere else, to reduce my life to gossip fodder. The studio audience froze. This wasn't the Hugh Jackman they were used to, the endlessly patient, impossibly kind superstar. This was a man whose dignity had been pressed too far, whose boundaries had been tested one time too many. Joy opened her mouth, maybe to defend herself, maybe to laugh it off, but Hugh didn't let her. For years, he continued, I've dealt with rumors, with speculation, with strangers deciding they know me better than I know myself. And every time, I've chosen grace. But your question, your tone, suggests that my privacy is a privilege dependent on your approval. It isn't. A murmur swept through the crowd like a gust of wind. Joy blinked, startled by the firmness in his voice. Wow, she muttered, half joking, someone's touchy. And that's when Hugh's composure cracked, not into anger, but into absolute clarity. This isn't about being touchy, he said. This is about basic respect. You don't get to demand explanations about a man's marriage, or his relationships, or his identity. Not for entertainment. Not for ratings. Not for anything. The silence that followed was colder, heavier, more electric than anything The View had hosted in years. Joy shifted uncomfortably. Whoopi finally stepped in, lifting a hand. All right, she said, her voice dropping into that no-nonsense tone only she could command. We're not going down that road. He was right. Everyone here deserves respect. But the damage was done. The tension was thick enough to feel. The studio was alive with that peculiar energy, half shock, half fascination, that only erupts when something real happens on a show built on chatter. Hugh leaned back, the muscles in his jaw slowly relaxing, but his eyes remained sharp, focused, unyielding. Like he'd finally spoken aloud words he'd held in for far too long. Joy forced a chuckle. Okay, she said, trying to recover the mood. No hard feelings. Hugh didn't smile. The audience noticed. Everyone noticed. And suddenly it wasn't just a show anymore. It wasn't an interview or a celebrity appearance or a scheduled segment. It was a moment, raw, unscripted, unforgettable. A moment the viewers at home would replay. A moment that would erupt across social media before the episode even finished airing. A moment the studio couldn't edit away or soften. A moment that revealed a side of Hugh Jackman the world had rarely seen. The man who stood his ground, who refused to be trampled by gossip or disrespect, who finally said, enough. But this was only the beginning. Because what happened next was even more explosive. The room felt different now, charged, unstable, like something fragile had cracked, and the pieces were still falling in slow motion. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every flicker of expression across Hugh Jackman's face, every uneasy shift from the hosts, and every breathless stare from the studio audience. It was the type of tension that didn't fade, it deepened, thickened, waiting for someone, anyone, to make the next move. Joy Behar tried to regain equilibrium with a light chuckle, but even she felt the shift. Her smile trembled just a bit at the corners. She wasn't used to being challenged, not like this, not by someone as universally adored as Hugh Jackman. Her showmanship had met its match in quiet, controlled fury. Still, she wasn't one to back down easily. Whoopi stepped in again, attempting to pivot. All right, let's move on, she said firmly. Hugh, tell us more about. But Hugh wasn't quite ready to let the moment disappear into scripted banter. He sat forward again, slowly, deliberately, not with the sharpness of anger, but the gravity of a man who wanted to make something absolutely clear. No, he said, voice calm but resolute. Before we move on, I need to say this. Every camera in the studio shifted toward him. Joy stiffened. Sonny's eyes widened. The producers, behind the glass panel above the studio, scrambled, gesturing wildly at each other. Do they cut to commercial? Do they let him speak? Do they intervene? But something in Hugh's demeanor, steady, firm, unmistakably sincere, made it impossible to interrupt. Even they knew this wasn't the moment to silence him. Hugh took a breath, not shaky, not shallow, controlled. Centered. I've spent decades in this industry, he began. And I've always believed that the work, the craft, the connection with audiences, that's what should matter. But somewhere along the line, the narrative changed. The world became obsessed with personal lives, private struggles, and assumptions that had nothing to do with the work. The audience listened in pin-drop silence. "You've asked me things today," he continued, looking directly at Joy, "that you know are invasive. Questions made to corner me, to get a reaction. And maybe you think that's just the job. But we are human beings, Joy. Not targets. Not storylines. Not characters for entertainment." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Hugh raised a calm hand. Not in a dismissive way, but in a quiet request to finish. "I've always tried to be gracious," he said, "because I genuinely love connecting with audiences, meeting people, sharing stories. But grace is not the same as submission. Kindness is not the same as weakness." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. Even Sarah Haynes nodded slightly, impressed by the depth and clarity in Hugh's tone. It was rare to witness a celebrity push back in such a controlled, impactful way, without theatrics, without shouting, without turning the moment into a spectacle. Joy's usual confidence began slipping. Her tone softened, defensive. "Hugh, I wasn't trying to attack you. It's just entertainment?" Hugh asked quietly. "Just a question? Just a rumor? You might not mean harm, but harm doesn't need intention. It only needs repetition. And every time someone brings these things up, every time it's laughed about or dissected, it chips away at something real." The audience felt the weight of those words. They weren't just meant for Joy anymore. They were meant for anyone who had ever consumed or repeated gossip, anyone who had forgotten that celebrities were human beings first. Joy cleared her throat. "I didn't mean." Hugh cut her off gently. "I know you didn't. But this isn't the first time. Not just you, not just this show. It's everywhere. And I'm tired." That admission landed hard. The vulnerability in his voice wasn't rehearsed. It trembled with exhaustion and truth. People in the audience shifted in their seats, not out of discomfort, but out of empathy. A few lowered their heads slightly, realizing they had cheered for those very rumors at one point. Joy wasn't sure how to respond. For once, she was the one scrambling for footing. She glanced at the other hosts, but no one intervened. Even Whoopi, all authority and instincts, remained silent, watching Hugh with an understanding expression. Then, unexpectedly, Sunny spoke. "Hugh," she said softly, "you don't owe anyone an explanation about your private life. And honestly, I think it's brave that you're saying this. People forget privacy isn't optional just because someone is famous." Hugh turned towards Sunny and gave a small, grateful nod. A flicker of relief crossed his features. Not enough to dissolve the tension, but enough to soften the edges. Joy, however, wasn't done trying to repair the moment. She leaned forward again, her voice slightly more defensive now. "Look, Hugh, you have to admit, when celebrities don't address rumors, they leave room for speculation. People get curious. They fill in the gaps." Hugh closed his eyes briefly, as if centering himself again. "And I understand curiosity," he said, opening them slowly. "Curiosity is human. But entitlement? That's different. People are not entitled to someone's marriage, or health, or identity, or grief, or heartbreak. They can be curious, but it doesn't give them the right to demand answers. That line, curiosity is human, but entitlement is different, hung in the air like a profound truth. Even Joy blinked, unsure whether to challenge it or absorb it. The audience, however, absorbed it. Entirely. Whoopi finally stepped in again, sensing Hugh had made his point. "All right," she said gently. "Let's take a second." The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted, painting the stage with something quieter, something more introspective. The interview continued, but not smoothly. Hugh answered questions about his film and his work, but the emotional undercurrent never dissipated. Every time he spoke, his voice carried an edge, not of anger, but of someone trying to hold himself together after being pushed too far. Joy stayed unusually quiet, chiming in occasionally, but never with the same boldness she'd displayed earlier. It wasn't fear, it was awareness. She knew she had crossed a line, even if pride wouldn't let her fully admit it yet. Still, the damage lingered. About halfway through the next segment, it happened. Joy made a small joke, just a harmless comment about actors being dramatic, and something in Hugh snapped again. This time, it wasn't an outburst. It wasn't a speech. It was a look so sharp, so cold, so unmistakably wounded that it silenced the room without a single word. Joy froze mid-laugh. Sarah's lips parted slightly. Sunny stared at Hugh, shocked at the sudden visible fracture in his calm. The audience held their breath. "Drama isn't the same as emotion," he said quietly. "And emotion isn't a flaw." Joy swallowed. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't attacking. But the clarity of his words felt like a blade made of truth. Light, clean, impossible to ignore. From that moment on, the interview took on an entirely new shape. The hosts asked questions carefully, almost cautiously. Hugh responded with a mixture of composure and unfiltered sincerity. The viewers in the studio were glued to every second, feeling like they were witnessing something raw, something unplanned, something unforgettable. Then came the moment that no one, especially Joy, expected. A producer's voice suddenly crackled through the studio speakers. "We need to cut to break." But Hugh didn't move. Instead, he lifted his eyes, stared directly at Joy, and said words that would go viral by the end of the day. "You have a platform," he said. "Use it wisely. Words matter. And today yours crossed a line." Joy blinked fast, her expression flushing with something between embarrassment and shock. The audience gasped. The hosts froze. And then, only then, did the show cut abruptly to commercial, the screen fading before anyone could react or recover. But backstage, that was where the real explosion happened. And what Hugh said off camera, that was even more intense. Backstage, the moment the commercial break swallowed the screen and the theme music cut out, the studio air shifted from tense to absolutely electric. Crew members exchanged wide-eyed looks. Camera operators pulled off their headsets with shaky hands. Stage assistants, usually quick and efficient, hesitated in the aisles, unsure whether to move toward Hugh, Joy, or nowhere at all. It was the kind of atmosphere that follows a lightning strike, bright, raw, buzzing with aftershock. Hugh Jackman stepped off the platform first, walking with a calmness that didn't match the storm brewing beneath his expression. His jaw was locked tight, the muscles along his neck strained, his breathing controlled but sharp. He wasn't raging, he wasn't the yelling type, but he was carved from a precise, dangerous kind of disappointment. The kind that comes from years of swallowing things that should never have been swallowed in the first place. Joy Behar followed behind him, not hurried, but noticeably unsettled. She was trying to smile, trying to regain control of the situation in her usual way. Jokes, shrugging, brushing things off, but her face betrayed her. The color in her cheeks was higher than usual. Her eyes darted toward Hugh with a mixture of irritation and unease. A stage manager approached carefully. "Hugh, if you need a minute." "I'm fine," Hugh said. His tone wasn't rude, but it was final. Whoopi moved toward him next, slower, more cautious, like someone approaching a friend whose walls had unexpectedly shattered. "Hugh," she said softly. "Let's talk." He didn't snap. He didn't turn away. He paused, just enough to show respect, and then met her eyes. "I've done this show many times," he said. "You know I love being here." "I know you do," Whoopi replied. "But that crossed a line." Whoopi nodded. "I know." There was understanding there. Not excuse, not deflection. Just truth. Whoopi had seen every kind of tension walk through these halls. But this? Hugh's quiet anger wasn't the anger of ego. It was the anger of being reduced, misunderstood, poked like an animal in a cage. And she knew better than anyone how deeply that could cut. Joy, arms crossed now, stepped closer. "Oh, come on, Hugh," she said. "You're making this a lot bigger than it was." He looked at her. Really looked at her. A long, measured stare that stripped away the television lights, the rehearsed lines, the comedic bravado. "Joy," he said, voice low, steady, unflinching. "You don't get to decide what hurts someone." That landed like a hammer dropping onto glass. Joy's expression faltered. She glanced at the crew, at Whoopi, at Hugh again. She wasn't used to people calling her out, especially not calmly. Loudness she could handle. Shouting she could match. Sarcasm she could outdo. But calm truth? That was harder. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she insisted. Hugh nodded once. "Intention isn't the only thing that matters." Joy's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She had no comeback for that, not one that wouldn't make things worse. A producer hurried over, whispering something urgent into Joy's ear. She nodded but kept glancing at Hugh, as though trying to find a foothold, a path back into safer territory. But Hugh wasn't offering one. Instead, he took a step back, releasing a breath he'd been holding since the moment those invasive questions were lobbed at him on live television. Sunny and Sarah approached next, their expressions sympathetic. "Hugh, for what it's worth," Sarah began, brushing her hand against his arm. "I thought you handled yourself with so much grace." Sunny nodded. "Truly. Most people wouldn't have stayed calm the way you did." Hugh gave them a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. I appreciate that." He meant it too. Their warmth and sincerity softened the tension just enough for him to breathe fully again. But the momentary calm didn't last long. Because behind them, the executive producer stormed in. Clipboard tucked under one arm, headset askew, frustration radiating off her like heat from a furnace. "Okay," she said sharply. "We need to regroup. Hugh, we need to talk about how the next segment is going to go." Hugh cut her off with a raised hand. "I'm not doing the next segment." The words froze the room. Joy blinked rapidly. Whoopi looked down. Sunny's lips parted. Sarah gasped softly. The producer stared at him, startled. "What do you mean?" "We still have." "I mean," he repeated clearly. "I'm not going back out there." The studio seemed to shrink around them. "We can salvage this," the producer insisted. "We can shift the questions, change the tone." No, Hugh's voice wasn't loud, but it was absolute. "I'm not going to sit back at that table and pretend what happened didn't happen." Joy bristled. Oh, please. So you're just going to walk out? Storm off like some diva. Hugh turned his head toward her slowly. Very slowly. It wasn't a threatening movement. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was disappointment so deep it cut the air around him. Joy, he said, if standing up for myself makes me a diva, then so be it. Whoopi let out a quiet breath, a mixture of shock and respect. Joy scoffed, folding her arms even tighter. Oh, come on. You're being dramatic. Hugh closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. You asked about my marriage. You suggested I was hiding something. You mocked my boundaries. That's not drama. That's disrespect. Joy rolled her eyes. You're a public figure, Hugh. It's part of the job. His gaze darkened, not in rage, but in something heavier, more resolute. No, he said quietly. That's the part of the job people like to pretend is acceptable because it benefits them. But it's not acceptable. Not anymore. The producer looked panicked. Hugh, please, we need you back out there. Hugh shook his head. I'm not punishing the show. I'm protecting myself. Then he added, with an elegance that made everyone in the room go silent. Kindness is my default. But don't mistake it for permission. Joy finally broke. You know what? She snapped. Fine. Walk out. Leave in the middle of the show. Make your point. Hugh didn't flinch. I'm not here to make a point, he said. I'm here to stop being treated like a headline. He began walking toward the exit, the air moving with him like the pull of a tide. But then, someone stepped into his path. An unexpected person. A crew member, young, nervous, holding a bundle of cue cards, stood directly in front of him, trembling slightly. Mr. Jackman, she said softly, I'm sorry for what happened out there. Hugh paused. She swallowed, continuing. You didn't deserve that. None of it. And everyone back here knows it. Her voice wavered, but her sincerity didn't. Hugh felt something shift in his chest. Surprise, gratitude, the piercing feeling of being seen after feeling cornered. He gave her a gentle smile. Thank you, he said quietly. That means more than you know. She stepped aside. But the moment wasn't over, not even close. Because when Hugh reached the stage doors, Joy called out one last time, her voice cracking just slightly at the edges. So that's it? You're just going to walk out? Hugh stopped. He turned back, not fast, not dramatically, just enough to face her fully. And what he said next would become the most replayed, most dissected moment of the entire showdown. He looked at Joy, straight through her defenses, straight through the show's shiny walls, and said, No, I'm walking away. There's a difference. Joy froze. The room froze. And before anyone could speak, before the producer could negotiate, before Whoopi could mediate, before any host could salvage the moment, Hugh Jackman pushed open the stage door and walked out. The sound of that door closing echoed like a shockwave. But the real explosion was still to come, because the moment his exit hit social media, all hell broke loose. The studio stayed frozen for several long seconds after the door shut behind Hugh Jackman. It wasn't just silence. It was the kind of silence that swallows everything, that presses against the walls and leaves the air thick and unmoving. The crew stared at the closed door. The hosts remained still in their places backstage, caught between shock, regret, and the dawning realization that something deeply irreversible had just happened. Then, like a sudden exhale, the studio burst into motion. Producers swarmed into frantic whispers. Assistants sprinted down hallways. Someone from the sound team muttered, "This is going viral in 10 minutes. Someone else replied, 10? Try 2. Meanwhile, Joy stood by the table, arms crossed, cheeks flushed. Not with confidence, but with something far more vulnerable. Embarrassment. Defensive pride. The sting of having pushed someone too far on live TV. Sarah approached her carefully. Joy, maybe just let it cool down. Joy scoffed, though her voice trembled. I didn't do anything wrong. He overreacted. Sunny shot her a look. Joy, come on. It wasn't just one question. It was a build-up. You know that. Joy's eyes flashed. He's a grown man. If he can't handle a little heat, maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews. Whoopi walked over, her expression calm but firm. Her version of a raised alarm. This isn't heat. This is someone's dignity. And you poked at it until he snapped. Joy opened her mouth to protest again, but the producer cut in. We're back in 30 seconds. Everyone to positions. The hosts rushed to the table, but the energy was unmistakably fractured. The audience sensed the shift before the show even returned from commercial. People whispered in their seats, glancing at the empty guest chair. Some looked stunned, others uneasy, others excited in that uncomfortable way people get when witnessing real tension on a show built on surface-level conversation. The cameras went live again. Whoopi cleared her throat. Well, as you may have noticed, Hugh had to step away. A nervous ripple moved through the crowd. Joy forced a laugh. Yeah, I guess I scared him away. The audience did not laugh. Not even a chuckle. The silence hit her like a slap. Whoopi shot her a sharp look, one that silently said, "Stop." Now, Sunny recovered the mood as best she could. "We respect Hugh and his boundaries, and we hope he's all right." Sarah nodded. We all have moments where things get overwhelming. But the unease never lifted. The hosts felt it. The audience felt it. The viewers at home felt it the second the cameras returned. And social media? Social media exploded instantly. The online firestorm. Within 3 minutes of Hugh's departure, the first clips hit X, formerly Twitter. Short snippets of Joy's invasive questions. Longer clips of Hugh's calm but devastating pushback. Slow-mo edits. Subtitles. Reaction posts. Then trending hashtags. Hashtag Hugh Jackman. Hashtag Joy Behar. Hashtag The View. Hashtag Respect Boundaries. Hashtag Hugh Deserves Better. And the most viral tag of all. Hashtag He Walked Away. People were divided, but not evenly. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of comments poured in, overwhelming every feed. He handled that with so much restraint. I would have blown up. Joy crossed the line. That wasn't journalism. That was harassment. Hugh Jackman setting boundaries is the most powerful thing I've ever seen. This is why celebrities hide their personal lives. She acted like he owed her something. He didn't. Protect Hugh at all costs. Memes surfaced within minutes. Edits of Hugh standing up for himself. Compilation videos of Joy pushing too far with other guests. Commentators posting reaction videos dissecting the confrontation. By the time the episode ended, the fallout was unstoppable. News outlets picked it up. Entertainment channels ran breaking banners. Headlines screamed, "Hugh Jackman walks out of The View after tense exchange with Joy Behar." Unprecedented moment. Hugh Jackman breaks silence on gossip culture. Joy Behar under fire after heated interview. Joy didn't stay silent for long. Backstage, once the cameras stopped rolling, she stormed into the green room, muttering irritably, "I'm not apologizing. I did my job." Whoopi followed her, shutting the door behind them. What happened inside that room wasn't recorded. But the shouting, Joy's rising tone, Whoopi's stern attempts to mediate, echoed faintly through the hallway. Sarah and Sunny remained outside, exchanging quiet glances. "This is going to blow up," Sarah whispered. Sunny nodded. "It already has." And then, Hugh's statement dropped. It wasn't a tweet. It wasn't a video. It was a simple message posted across all his platforms. Respect is not optional. Everyone has boundaries. Today, mine were crossed. I will always choose kindness, but I will also choose myself. Hugh. The internet shook. Comments poured in by the millions. "You didn't deserve that. You handled it like a class act. Good for you. Joy owes you a public apology." That message is going on my wall. Even celebrities chimed in. Actors, directors, musicians, comedians, all stepping into the conversation. Most of them defending Hugh, praising him, calling the moment overdue. By the end of the day, The View issued a formal statement saying they supported respectful dialogue and valued the dignity of their guests. But everyone knew exactly what that meant. Everyone knew who it was addressing. Everyone knew where the responsibility lay. And for once, Joy's usual unapologetic persona didn't shield her from backlash. Clips resurfaced. Commentary bloomed. The public's patience for invasive questioning had shifted, and Hugh had unknowingly become the emblem of that change. The audience speaks. The next day, during the show's taping, something unprecedented happened. Audience members held signs. "Boundaries matter. We support you, Hugh. Joy, do better." Joy looked uncomfortable. Flustered. Tense in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. Whoopi addressed the crowd before cameras rolled. "We know yesterday was intense," she said. "We know people have thoughts. And that's okay." They did indeed. The View's comment sections were overflowing with opinions, debates, arguments, calls for Joy to apologize, calls for the show to change its tone, calls for respecting guests rather than provoking them. Some supported Joy, but they were the minority. And the producers knew this. Change was coming. Not because the show wanted it, but because the public demanded it. Hugh behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Hugh remained quiet the rest of the day. He spent time with his team, decompressing, reflecting. Those closest to him noted that while he was emotionally drained, he wasn't regretful. He had spoken up. He had set boundaries. He had walked away from something that no longer served him. And that, in its own cinematic way, was the moment millions found empowering. The final wave. By nightfall, Hugh's team released a second, softer message. This one meant to reassure his fans. "I'm okay. Truly. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your voices. And thank you for reminding the world that respect still matters." The world responded with warmth, praise, gratitude. While Joy issued a short statement. Not quite an apology, more like a half step in the direction of accountability. Her words didn't land with the same sincerity as Hugh's. But that's how it goes. Some moments define a conversation. Some voices reshape expectations. And sometimes the quietest breaking point becomes the loudest catalyst for change. The aftermath. By the end of the week, media analysts were calling it one of the most pivotal daytime TV moments of the decade. Think pieces filled online platforms. Clips hit 100 million views combined. Fans created art, edits, animations. And for the first time in a long time, a celebrity setting boundaries wasn't mocked, it was celebrated. This wasn't the story of a meltdown. It wasn't the story of a diva moment. It was the story of a man who had taken all he could until he couldn't. A man who said no, calmly, clearly, powerfully. A man who walked away. And a moment the world will not soon forget. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Hugh right to stand up for himself? Was Joy out of line? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Stage View for more explosive, cinematic deep dives into the stories behind Hollywood's most unforgettable moments.